Morning. Sorry to be a minute late.
That's all right.
Apologies.
Well, I guess just by way of introduction, for those who didn't make the last meeting, I guess really two things that are relevant here. One is we really started, I really wanted to have the conversation to see whether or not it might be possible to have some shorter online meetings to talk through permits and maybe take some of the content out of our, long 5-hour meetings, or maybe get rid of them altogether. Um, and as it turned out, because we didn't have a quorum, we kind of needed to do that because of some unfinished business at the January meeting. So thanks to all of you for coming. And I don't know that you need to speak to this right now, Hannah, but essentially our bylaws or our governing rules really state that we can't actually just vote one by one remotely on any of these proposals, that we actually do have to have a warned called meeting to actually talk about these, so that the public has a chance to weigh in if they are so inclined, and that these are essentially duly recorded in our minutes and our activities.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. And it's less about the public weighing in. I mean, they don't have the opportunity to weigh in on the vote, but more about the process just being part of an open meeting, so that it can be verified by the public that the vote was taken and you actually voted the way we are saying you voted in the end.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, thanks.
Was there still an open question, though, about what our actual quorum number is, given ambiguity about state? Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that's an open question, and I've gotten feedback from a few different folks, and including I think that some of the agency appointees, including from the Agency of Ag, might have different perspectives. So I don't have a clear answer yet. I think it's worth some further discussion. But yeah, I didn't have an answer for today. I apologize. I think that there's probably some historic context that I'm missing, frankly.
Yeah, thanks for that, Hannah. I mean, the issue that comes up is if we only have four of the, essentially the gubernatorial appointees in a meeting, we have a quorum if we've only got 6 voting members. But if we have, officially have 9 voting members, then we have to have 5 of the gubernatorial appointed ESC members to have a quorum. So I guess yeah. So I guess we'll just continue to work through that. So
as long as we've got enough today, yeah, we can circle back to this question.
We are good today. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jed, and bats and a recommendation for a new member to the Mammal SAG.
All right, great. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for your time here. Alyssa, nice to see you as well. So please chime in if I've missed some key details. Alyssa is, of course, on the Mammal SAG group as well. Yeah, so 2 items. The first is our advice regarding a T&E permit application that was put forward by Glenn Gingras on behalf of VTrans. There is a proposed or a project that's moving forward to do some road rebuild and reconstruction between Brandon and Pittsford. It will result in the loss of about 11 acres of forest. A number of bat species occurred there. They consulted with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the 2 endangered species, or at least the 2 listed species, the first being the Indiana bat, and the second being the northern long-eared bat. There is another species, the tricolored bat, that's also proposed for endangered on the ESA. Fish and Wildlife Service has a process for this that I'm not too familiar with, but they basically reviewed the materials, determined that take very well could occur, and arrange for a mitigation in the form of a payment to something called the Conservation Fund that distributes funds contributed to it for conservation activities in the state around the species, but sometimes they creep into other states if opportunities present. So that was a payment for 123,000 or so. And that was, I think, where Fish and Wildlife Service ended. It then moved over to us for a T&E taking permit for those 3 species, laid out the review. We didn't really have any issues with the permit for those 3 species, but several members did flag that state listed species were not included in there. So the 2 that would be relevant would include the little brown bat, and the other would be the eastern small-footed bat. Now, this is a pretty small area. It's like 11 acres. After some back and forth and some responses from VTrans to questions we had, and I want to thank John Cart and Alyssa for facilitating that. We do recommend adding those 2 species to the permit, but I would say that the risk to those 2 species is really low. So for little brown bats, for the most part, and Alyssa, I'll draw on you if I've misspoken, but generally will roost in structures like buildings. They have been recorded roosting in trees, but that's pretty rare. So risk is by and large pretty minimal. There will be no demolition of buildings or structures in the footprint of this work. VTrans confirmed that, which again further reduces the risk. For the other species, the eastern small-footed bat, they are specialized really on like slate piles and talus slopes and kind of rocky outcrops. VTrans confirmed that habitat really is not present in the footprint or immediate area of the site. So yes, they may occur in that area, but the risk is really low. Nonetheless, it is possible. So our recommendation is to add those 2 species to the permit. I think John and Alyssa also thought that would be reasonable. In the write-up that I submitted to the ESC, I had recommended that the applicant send back a revised takings permit, but I'd leave that to your purview. I think because the risk is so low, you could probably vote as it is with the addendum of adding the 2 species in as potential species that could be taken. John, go ahead.
I'll just add, well, thanks, Jed, for telling that story well. I'll just add that when we did get the application in, Alyssa and I noticed that those other 2, that the state listed bats were not included, and I told VTrans that they would be included in the permit. I didn't ask them to update the permit or the application because it's actually the permit that seems to matter, and just trying to just save a little time. If you want, I could certainly get VTrans to amend the application.
I don't think it's entirely necessary. But the permit application asks for specific things about the individual species. Mm-hmm. But I think given the responses by VTrans, the fact that there's no habitat there is no building construction, I'm not sure there'd be much to add to our discussion, to our information set from new responses to those questions. So I'm okay moving this forward as is with the addition of those 2 species. Let me also just state that they have planned the activities of this project outside of the pup rearing season to minimize impact, but it does occur during an active bat period, and that's what triggered partly the review by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So it is happening during a time when bats are there and active, but it's not happening during a vulnerable period, especially for pups and population growth.
Thanks, Jed. Let's go Matt, Brian,
Sure.
and Allie.
Yeah, a couple questions or thoughts. I guess one, I should probably know this by now, but how have we approached the state takings permit fees in situations like this where we really can't seemingly quantify the level of take very well. I mean, obviously there's this 123,000 fee, which is much larger than anything we could levy through the state permit. But yeah, just wondering about that piece. And then the other question I had was just, do we have any insight into what sort of actual mitigation project would happen through the conservation fund channel?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure I can comment on the fee piece. John, you might have some insight. I'll defer to Alyssa too, also for the spending of those funds.
Want to take it, Alyssa?
Well, I think John, yeah, probably can answer the permit question, but I have been reached out to already by the conservation fund. Is that I'm getting that right? Yeah, they I'm meeting with someone today. I'm assuming it's about this. They started by identifying 4 different pieces of land that they own in Vermont and just asked if I could provide them with any information about distances from those pieces of land to known hibernation sites and known occupied summer habitat. So since that wasn't providing any specific location information, I was able to give them feedback on just how close that is. And then I asked if it would be helpful to meet so I could see how we could help them get whatever other information they need. And so I think they're going to ask for a data sharing agreement so that they can find parcels that they have that might be suitable. So again, I don't know yet. Often people contact me and don't share any details yet when stuff is still in the works like this. But I think that's what they're asking about.
Nice. I believe they still own some extensive properties down in the Taconics region that certainly include some nice rocky talusy habitats that might have relevance for bat species. I have no idea if those might be on the table, but.
So regarding Matt's question on permit fees, it's a 2-part answer. One, the statute assessing permit fees just says, for development projects or incidental take, it's $250 per species taken or per individual animal or plant taken. There's no guidance on like what to do when you can't, when you can't go and point at each individual one. So what we've done since the statute was changed was to go with the best estimate developed by our staff biologists. Then with that said, since this is a VTrans permit to VTrans, there is a statute that exempts VTrans from all ANR permit fees, except about 150 DEC permit fees. They rake in they bring in a lot of money to fund the work they cover for VTrans, but we don't even have one exemption to the exemption. But before I go on that rant again, I'm going to stop.
Thanks for that reminder. We've probably gone over that before, but.
Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I had some technical issues, so I might have missed this. I just recently signed in with audio. This memo from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from David Simons had some good stuff in there about reasonable and prudent measures for the mitigation. And that memo was from December of 2024, which was a different time at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'm wondering if it's like still in play, whether some of the recommendations as part of the mitigation are still in play, and whether they would still be the position of U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or whether it's relevant anymore. If you know that, yeah.
I think I could speak to that if you want, Jen.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, because I work with them regularly. So, the tricolored bat was proposed for federal protection. I think they put a lot of tools in place and often have wrapped that species up in their analysis. As of late, because they were anticipating it would be listed before the current federal administration change. So now we're not really sure when or if that will happen. So I think that's really the only thing that's changed in the last year and a half or two. Sometimes there are really small changes in how they're doing risk assessments in the background using their IPAC system and determination key, but nothing that's been major that would change this type of analysis that I've observed. So I'm not aware of anything that would change that analysis. Certainly, they do often encourage, if there's a federal nexus, for folks to get another another analysis done if a lot of time lapses, but I don't know how that applies specifically with transportation projects. The transportation agencies through federal highways have what's called a programmatic agreement. And so instead of there being everything project by project, they have this big agreement where they've done a lot of risk assessment already. And that's sort of a huge, long document. And then from there, they see if anything doesn't fit into it, it gets booted into a project by project, and then they'll reach out for kind of a consultation in this case. But I'm not aware of anything that would have changed in the background for their assessment or any differences with what we know about those two species that would change. So I would just say that's my awareness. But great question, yeah.
Okay, great. That helps. Thanks, Alyssa.
I mean, you may get some more insight too, Alyssa, when you speak to the Conservation Fund too, as to whether they're really taking seriously that set of recommendations in the letter, or how they're approaching like the criteria for making decisions on how to invest those funds.
Yeah, I think that might have been why they were fishing specifically for how far from known hibernation sites and known summer occupied. Yeah.
Okay, Paul and Carla.
Yeah, just I don't want to get off on a tangent too much here, but I'm just trying to understand this fee structure and how that whole thing works. So do I understand this correctly? The Vermont Department of Transportation is paying this fee to the Conservation Fund? Are they getting reimbursed by the federal government, or is this just coming out of state coffers?
Oh, you're muted, John. Muted.
I don't know which fund V-Trans is using, but they're it's part of V-Trans' bigger budget.
It seems like a huge amount of money, considering it's 11 acres of marginal habitat for these species. And I'm wondering, so what happens in the case where we have a project that's, let's say it's 1,100 acres, so it's 100 times bigger? Are we paying 100 times more in fees for? So that would be like, what is that? That's $10 million. How does that hold?
Yeah. Paul and Alyssa, I mean, John and Alyssa, you could comment more, but I think the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has some kind of formula for this. Right. Does that sound right? And I'm not sure I understand the nature of that formula, but there is a calculation that led to that number, as far as I know, Paul.
There is something, just interrupt, there is something in that memo I'm seeing on page 2. So it's that Fish and Wildlife Service memo dated starting with 2024-12. On the second page, under Indiana bat and northern long-haired bat tree removal, there is a description about how they got to that number.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say this, but I think if the general public found out that we were, as taxpayers, were coughing up $123,000 for, a road cut that's cutting down 11 acres of trees, people would be freaking out. Some people. I mean, I'm not saying this is, it's not a good idea, but I'm just trying to understand how this works. And again, if it was a bigger project, how does that play out? So I guess nobody knows the answer to that, but
sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say, I just put that memo in the chat, Paul, if you want to take a look at it.
That is a federal process to and federal compliance. So we don't get to weigh in on that.
And this is the first time in my memory that there was the federal government even weighed in, with requiring a fee for a project in Vermont. There's just only a handful of federally listed species in Vermont.
Right. I don't remember anything like this before. It's a great pile of money, though. It's awesome.
I feel like we've seen something like this with maybe the Deerfield wind or something like that. There were another case where there was some kind of, I think, bat related payments that circulated through a something with the conservation fund as a larger mitigation pool, but I don't remember the details.
Well, let's go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go, Carla and Allie. I think we're already 15 minutes behind, so let's. I want to keep this rolling.
That's fine. Just
yeah.
Thanks, Alan. I was just going to ask, maybe the question is for John. In the application materials, the number of individuals to be impacted was stated as less than 1%, which makes sense, but was just wondering, I guess, what the final impact per species or cumulatively was going to be issued for the permit. And I'm not voting on this permit, so I guess it's just curiosity.
Thanks for asking, Carla. We did not do that calculation because, again, VTrans is exempt from Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department or agent from endangered species permit fees.
Oh, but so interesting. So even separate from a fee, a permit is still able to be issued for a unspecified number of individuals?
Yes, thanks to Vermont statutes.
Okay.
Less than 1% of an unspecified number.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably bring that up in another conversation because I know you brought it up before, Carla, with some of the other permits that we've looked at where we just don't have a very exact number. I think it was on the lamprey amicetes or something like that where we talked about it a little bit. So probably worth putting that on another agenda. Go for it, Allie.
Oh yeah, I can make this quick just to tie back to what Paul said about the cost or the fee to the conservation. I do think there might need to be a little bit more transparency. This is just the first one of these I've seen where there isn't quite that direct site impact, and so understanding where that money, it is a large amount of money, and how that will actually benefit that habitat elsewhere. So just something to put a pin in. It sounds like Alyssa is going to get us some more information, but I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Allie. And yeah, if you haven't a chance to kind of keep us posted on that, Alyssa, that'd be great as conversations go forward. Yeah. Okay, I guess one just kind of logistical question. So, I mean, basically with the exception of making sure that the state listed species are included in the permit, does Mammal SAG have any other conditions or anything to add to that permit? I might not be finding the right documents, but I think the mammal advice sheet is blank as far as I can tell. But you might have emailed it.
I had a look at that and that's, it seems like it just has the blank version. So I can resend the completed version. Let me just have a quick look. Yeah, we didn't have any additional conditions with that. I mean, the conditions for us were to list the 2 state species and to resubmit the application with some of the more detailed information about, that the permit that the permit asks for and through their questioning. But like I said, I feel like the risk is really minimal, and I'm not sure we're going to gain much more knowledge than what we've received from VTrans. That we're comfortable pushing it forward as is without any additional conditions.
Okay. So, oh yeah, go ahead, Alyssa.
I don't know if this should be relevant to your decision-making discussion, but I would just put in that I think one reason we may not have seen many of these before is often VTrans is able to avoid any direct take concerns and get enough avoidance minimization measures, even with the feds, by having time of year restrictions. And because this is this long linear project, I think they were feeling like it was going to cost more in the trying to work around those construction timelines than it would in terms of Paul's question, in terms of paying the mitigation for the chance that their construction might go into the active season. And so I think they probably had to do that type of analysis and just couldn't guarantee they'd be able to get all the tree cutting done during the season when bats were underground. I know that they're working right now on their, I think, Act 250 permit application and hoping that they actually get it in time that they can actually cut all the trees before the active season anyway, or not go much into the active season after April 1st. So I think they're continuing to try to minimize, but again, they have to plan for the fact that there could be a risk to bats by cutting trees in the active season. So yeah, I think that I don't know, that's what I understand.
Would there be any sense in adding a condition that encourages but does not require the cutting to occur outside the active season as much as possible? I don't know. I don't know if that even does anything if it's framed that way, but.
John, is that something we would write into the permit?
Oh yeah, yes, and it's one of the reasons we want to try and get this out early so they can get, because I don't think they could get started on things until they have all their permits secured. So the sooner we can get, well, I'm sure this isn't the holdup, but yes, we can include in the permit, and certainly in just conversations with VTrans, they'd like to try and get out ahead of the active season.
Yeah, so we can put that in our ESC recommendations, Matt, as well. So, so I guess I would.
Could I offer one more quick minor recommendation too? One member recommended that VTrans be provided with a wildlife rehabilitator list that Vermont Fish and Wildlife has. So it sort of lists all the contact information for rehabilitators across the state. It's just a proactive step in case they do find an injured bat. Of course, they'd call Alyssa, but they'd have immediate information on who else to call for rehabilitation if necessary.
Yep, that sounds good.
We did include that note in our advice form as well, Alan.
Okay, all right. So I guess I'm looking for a motion, and I think the motion would be including those two conditions, list of rehabbers, and activity occurring outside of the active season. And I think, just to be clear, that we're not asking for a redo of the permit application, but we're asking for the state listed species to be included in the permit.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll second.
Do I have a
Second.
All right. Nice. All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. Oh, yes. Thanks, Carla. Yes. So one abstention. All right. Excellent. On to you, Matt. Cyperus.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. What's that?
Houghtonii, am I pronouncing that right?
Houghtonii.
Okay.
Yeah, Houghton's.
Jed, you have one more thing?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to put out again that we have one other mammal item.
Oh, right.
Geez. Yeah,
and
right.
I'm happy to do it later, but if it makes sense to do all the mammal stuff together, I'm happy to do it now. So just let me know. It's just a new member that we'd like to put forward for membership to the SAG.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do it? And I sent out the CV of Dr. Samantha Hoff, but you can say a few words.
Okay,
then.
I can be quick too. Matt, sorry about that. I hope that's
worries.
okay. I jump right in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like to put forward a new member for the mammal SAG. In our group, we have a lot of issues that come up around bats, small mammals as well, and we just don't have a lot of expertise. But we're excited to put forward a new lecturer here at UVM, actually in the Rubenstein School in our wildlife program, named Dr. Samantha Hoff. She comes with a lot of experience with bats, has a PhD from University of Albany that focused on research around white nose and myota species, MS in biodiversity conservation and policy, and a BA in environmental studies, a real rich background in science. She's a postdoc at Virginia Tech, served as a bat monitoring coordinator for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and 10 years at the New York Department of Environmental Conservation in their bird and mammal unit, where she's done many of the things we work on: wildlife action plans, species assessments, all sorts of things. So a real depth of knowledge, especially around bats. Was the VP of the Northeast Bat Working Group for some time. So we think she'd be a great addition and would allow us to kind of enliven our discussions and depth of knowledge around species like those we just focused on in this last permit application that came up. So we had a unanimous vote among members in favor of her membership and put that forward to you. I'm not sure if it comes forward as a motion from us, but would appreciate your support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agenda item for a vote. So
Okay.
I guess I'll ask, do we have a motion from the ESC to add Dr. Samantha Hoff to the mammal SAG?
So
I can make a
moved.
motion.
All right. Brian, how about you second?
I gladly will second that
All right.
nomination.
Any further discussion or questions? All right.
Like a slam dunk.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Unanimity.
Great. Wonderful. I'll let her know. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. And Matt, sorry for jumping in there.
No
All
worries,
right.
Jen.
Thanks, Jed. All right. Back to you, Matt.
Okay. I don't know if it's helpful to pull up the site plan at all for this. Do you want to try to do that, Alan?
Sure.
I can just provide some background. I guess, first of all, the species involved here, Houghton's flat sedge, is primarily a relatively short-lived perennial sandplain and sort of ledgy cliff brow species, dry habitats, relatively disturbance-adapted species that is a strong seed banker. This sandbar substation site and the species here might seem familiar because we've gone through past permits with this exact same species and site. So that's been helpful in that we have past experience with transplantation of the species that turns out to be not really the greatest strategy for this species, because the transplants often don't actually survive for that long. And so we've kind of concluded that perhaps the seed bank is of greater relevance to long-term management and protection of this species. And so for this particular permit, and Carla, jump in along the way here if I get anything wrong, or this has been a protracted process and a complicated project. So all the details might be totally fresh in my mind, but the proposed take in this particular project ends up being quite large, much larger than we would normally want to see for a population. Has been expressed in various ways. I think of it as being around the mid-80s% of the known population, but they've built a 25% buffer in the take number into the fees and the permit in order to account for the possibility that additional individuals would germinate and be discovered subsequent to the actual field surveys that happen to enumerate the population. So you're looking at the substation. The area outlined in purple is basically the impact area, and given that the large percentage take in this case, the ultimate plan that came out of this was for the creation of a substantial new habitat area that would be managed in the longer term by VFWD for this species in particular. And that's the area indicated in yellow there, the habitat creation area. There has been kind of a previous version of this concept is the little area, kind of a teal greenish area that's labeled as the existing habitat management area. That's had some similar kind of processes happen there in the past in terms of disturbing the habitat to make it more favorable for this species. The habitat creation area is currently wooded, so it has to be cleared and stumped and actually slightly regraded to create a more southerly aspect that would favor the dry conditions that this species likes, but the soils are thought to be similar, very sandy soils. So the basic idea here is that rather than trying to transplant individuals, there would be a soil stripping operation that would happen after the habitat creation area is made. So the top, I think it was 6 inches or so of soil from the impact area would be scraped off and transported and spread across the habitat creation area. And then that habitat creation area would be managed in the longer term for this species. I should say this project is, part of what was complicated about it was that it involves both this takings permit, but also the Section 248 permitting pathway. And so there's a memorandum of understanding associated with the certificate of public good for that process that has been used to create sort of a recurring commitment for 5-year permit renewals for ongoing management for the species at this site. So our takings permits are only good for 5 years, but then in this case, this memorandum of understanding through the CPG is requiring a renewal every 5 years that gives us an opportunity for sort of adaptive management for this species at this site, because we didn't want to be sort of locked into a totally prescribed approach to longer term management here, given that we don't know for sure how this habitat creation area will work out. So I think those are I guess the other piece is we're asking for seed collection at the upfront end of the project so that there'll be some seed banked in case the soil stripping and seed bank translocation doesn't work out, that we've got some something in the seed bank to hedge our bets. And there were a bunch of other conditions sort of laid out there in that advice form that I've probably missed something, but I think that captures the main points. I don't know, did I miss anything major there, Carla?
No, I think you hit it across the board.
Yeah, so if you, I think I've got the permit conditions up here. And so you can see, I mean, the V.S.A really did, I think, a nice job in terms of really, dotting their I's and crossing their T's in terms of looking at all the potential places that they really wanted to have some guardrails on this project. A little bit of information they wanted to just clarify in the proposed take. And then also, I think this is, sort of getting into what Matt was talking about with the 248 regulatory process, just thinking about the fact that because this is really extensive, trying to make sure we've got kind of an adaptive management process in place to continue to monitor this over time.
Yeah, and I guess I would add what tends to happen for this species is there's a disturbance event, a whole bunch of plants germinate out of the seed bank. They may do well for a time, but if there's not ongoing, moderate or intermediate level kind of disturbances, the sandy soil kind of grows in, even with just lichen cover and bryophytes and things like that. It eventually leads to the decline of and sort of habitat suitability in the short term. And then it's not until another disturbance event comes along that you get another flush of germination. And we've seen this even at historical sites where the species was documented, long ago, had seemed to disappear, but then there's some kind of site disturbance. And in one case, it was actually I think a tilling for an archaeological surveys at a site. And then we had this whole flush of flat sedge plants that came out and created additional permitting issues, I think. But so just an illustration of the long-term seed banking and the trajectory that these things happen. So particularly with the high degree of take in this permit, we wanted to try to build in a longer term plan for management at the site, since this has been kind of an ongoing or a recurrent issue.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, one question was what proportion of the overall state population is this site going to impact?
That's a good question. I don't have that right at my fingertip. I do have a number of other sites scattered around the state. They vary widely in size, but part of that is sort of because of the ecology of this species, where, I've found single plant populations on a dry cliff brow habitat, but in another year that population could fluctuate wildly. There's another population nearby nearby on Sandbar, out by the beach in State Park, that had been tillage there, and again a huge number of plants came out of the seed bank and were really robust for a time. And I'm not sure where that's at right now, but I don't know. Carla, do you have right offhand? I could dig for that, and at least an approximate number of total population in the state, but
I don't know off the top of my head, but I would have offered the same comment that things fluctuate sort of pretty wildly year to year, just based on kind of boom and bust of the ecology of the species and habitat. There is another site for the species on another Velco substation, not super nearby, but pretty nearby. And at least I surveyed that one. It was that 2 summers ago, and it was pretty robust at that time. So they are around and sort of cranking along.
So what would be the natural disturbance factor that would allow this thing to continue? Is it fire related, or?
It could be fire, or historically in our sandplain habitats, wind disturbance was part of it at some sites too. I mean, the site here is, at this point, it's essentially an anthropogenically maintained and disturbed, almost created kind of site. My understanding is that there are maybe some separate occurrence or subpopulations somewhat nearby. I recall Aaron talking about this. You know more of the details of that, Carla? That maybe historically there was a more connected population when the sand plains were a bit more active.
Yeah, I remember Aaron mentioning the additional subpopulation. I don't remember where we landed on, if it was sort of decided or just pontificated about previous connection.
Yeah, and Paul, for a little bit of additional context, I just dug up some data. This might be a couple years out of date, but we have in the neighborhood of 16 populations. There's 16 occurrences around the state. That might be
Okay.
missing a couple, but so at least in terms of numbers, that doesn't
Right.
get at numbers of individuals, but
Right, but it's probably a small, 10% or something like that at maximum.
yeah.
Yeah. And the SAG is fine with the new area being smaller than the old area. I think the one mitigation area is 0.7 acres, whereas the bigger area was like an acre. And you guys feel good about that? That's okay.
It's maybe not ideal, but I think there were constraints at the site. I know Grace and Bob Zano both went out and for a site visit in the earlier stages, trying to figure out where would be suitable. And there's also being sandplain habitats. There, you're not wanting to impact other more intact areas as well. So I don't know. Maybe Carly, you can speak more to the site constraints than I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think where the habitat creation area is shown on the site plan that was on screen a few minutes ago, it has sort of maxed out what could become suitable sandplain habitat. The slope sort of starts to pitch off, moving further to the east, and sort of like Matt was saying, more intact, higher functioning forest habitat to the south and west there. And in terms of the area, just something else to keep in mind, that the substation expansion and continued vegetation management, around the perimeter fence of the substation is, for better or worse, additional habitat, right? This species is growing currently up between rock in a staging area, parking lot. So that habitat is expected to persist.
Yeah. More seed.
Yeah, and that was part of the reason I think where we built in some, I guess a threshold for, or a metric for success of the mitigation in terms of a 2-to-1 mitigation population, but we wanted it to be assessed across the entire site because there are other activities across the site that are not designed for the species, but are in effect potentially enhancing habitat for the species.
Yeah. Great, thanks.
Yeah, I guess so. The one thing I would say that we talked a little bit about at the meeting in January is just the fact that this is, it's kind of unique in a lot of ways. I mean, a massive mitigation area that Velco is going to take responsibility for creating. So, you sort of hate in some ways to be experimenting with an endangered species, but at the same time, kind of cool to have this experiment going on. Just to, especially for a species that's disturbance related. And, it seems like there is some opportunities to really learn something here. Yeah,
and I think in our discussion of the FloraSAG with the Velco's representatives, it's, they're long-term, they're hoping for some kind of general permit that will address, rather than addressing all of these rare species issues one at a time, will kind of create a broader plan for that. And it seems like having a habitat creation area that's managed, that's sort of out of harm's way, could be a powerful piece in a situation, at least in a situation like this, where the existing population is really within a totally anthropogenic kind of site. If this had been a pristine, cliff brow natural community or something where the species was occurring, I think we would have had a pretty different comfort level with this approach. But given the nature of this particular site, it seemed like a good place to do the experiment, at least.
Yeah. So I guess I'm looking for a motion to approve the permit with the conditions and stipulations that the FloraSAG has brought forward.
So moved.
So moved.
add that, given the extent of this take, it's sort of commendable work here by the applicant and by the floral SAG. Seems like a model project.
And Grace was, of course, huge in getting all this sorted out. She definitely deserves thanks for getting it there.
All right. Can I count you as a second, Paul?
Yeah, second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are you an abstention again, Carla? Or you? I can't remember. Okay. All right.
Yep.
All right. So 5 ayes and an abstention. All right. Now with 6 minutes left in our meeting, Ken. I do have another meeting at 11, so I'm definitely going to have to bow out. I would say, Kent, if you want to maybe give us a little background and maybe some of the questions that the invertebrate SAG is grappling with, and we may just have to find another time to talk about this one in more detail.
Sure. So the ISAG took on the Taconic cave amphipod for critical habitat. Honestly, we thought it'd be easy. And it turned out to be, as all of them are, pretty detailed. And this thing lives, we only know of it in Vermont in one cave, Morris Cave, in one spot in Morris Cave, the lake room, which is connected to the phoretic zone, which is the water zone it's basically the bottommost water table. And that's connected to so it's probably level with Otter Creek, which is adjacent to it. And so it hasn't been sampled for since the 1970s. We assume it still exists there. There's 2 other sites, one in Massachusetts and one in New York, and that's it for the world. The type specimen is from Morris Cave. One cool piece of natural history, it's theorized and probably correct that it may be one of the only organisms that spent the ice age, the glaciation period in Vermont. It lived in that cave probably through the glaciation. So that's kind of cool. We decided to look at critical habitat on this because we started hearing about some damage to the cave. And then when we looked into it even closer, we found readily online a lot of, I would call them beginner spelunkers, not even amateurs, like going into this cave, which is actually quite a dangerous cave in some respects because it has some very, very, very narrow passageways to get through to get down to the lake. And so there's pretty ample evidence online of people going to the lake and actually swimming in the lake, unbelievably, disturbing the lake, like doing all kinds of stuff, human excrement near the lake, like all kinds of bad things. And so we decided we really needed to look at critical habitat for this, at least being the cave, if not a buffer zone around the cave. And then we've talked about, so in grappling with those issues a little bit, which maybe not the SAG's problem, but we'd be happy to be involved in this if it goes further, which was okay, if it's more than the cave, what is the buffer zone? So we had to map out. Fortunately, in the 70s, this cave was mapped really well. And so we were able to use those underground maps to find out on the surface where that lake might be located. And so that's approximately where the lake is on your screen. We know where it is superficially. And so we, for now, just put a 120-meter buffer zone around the entrance of the cave to sort of protect the top of the cave as a holding point, or it could be what we do in the end. But the cave itself was really what we were mostly concerned about. But then at the last meeting, it was brought up to us that that someone said, "Hey, have you talked to a hydrologist?" And we were like, "We really want to." And someone had the name of the hydrologist at the DEC, so I did contact the DEC hydrologist, and she, Julia, was great. At last minute, got to me back and forth on some emails, and she also copied the geological survey, which I haven't heard back from the state geological survey, but she provided a bunch of stuff for us, for me, about this, about the hydrology. And basically, in a nutshell, and I can write this into the report more if we decide to, but basically, she said, you've already tackled the literature that I would have tackled, which is this report by Quick on the cave. And she said, I'll just note that like it's probably hydrologically connected to Otter Creek, because he notes all the flood lines in there and noted during drought of 1995 that the lake was drawn way down. And so it's probably connected definitely to Otter Creek, if not other surface groundwater recharge. But without data, she couldn't speculate on how connected it was. But that it's obvious that it is at some level. And that there's no public water supplies near there or known wells near there, so she couldn't draw on like if there's any water samples or anything like that. There's nothing around there for her to draw on for that. And encouraged us that if we did sample for the organism, that we also sample for water quality, and then we could also work with some of them to sample for I'm forgetting what it's called, but the water age, basically, that it tells you how connected it is to other water sources. So that would be helpful in the future, to understand sort of more about the hydrology. But there is apparently, according to her, based on Quick's analysis of the cave, that it has some kind of connectivity with the hydrology around it, probably Otter Creek, because it's that deep, and connected to that valley bottom. And then finally, I'll just say that we didn't come up with any ideas about management or anything. That's not really our job here to do that. But we would be happy to help with that. But we had our ideas range from like working with the cave association to figure out how we could maybe either block the lake room or make the cave associate, because it's not the cave association people, it's people that are probably these random people going in there, to figure out a way to make it a little bit harder for people to get into the lake room area. And no one, even the town that owns the land around it, probably doesn't even know there's an endangered species there. Nothing's been really done with this thing since it was listed in, I believe, 1984. It was the first invertebrate listed, I believe. And so there's a variety of things that we could do in regards to the cave itself. And then above the cave, again, there's a variety of things we could do there in regards to buffer zones and contacting landowners. I don't think it has to be necessarily this draconian lock the cave up, but I think it probably in the end needs some kind of management in some way, people management. How's that, Alan, for a quick summary?
Yeah, that's great. I think what I'll probably try to do, I don't know, Brian, you've got your hand up. I'll just say one thing here is maybe I will kind of summarize some of the things that Kent is mentioned here and some of the, I think, the kind of discussion points we want to talk about. Send that out in an email, and I think we'll just need to find another time to chat about this. Well, yeah, go for it, Brian.
Just a quick question, probably not a concern, but is our vote, would this thing go into a batch of rulemaking that's coming soon, or could we put this off to the April meeting? How important is it that we do it now?
I don't want to speak for the state, but I think the rulemaking is maybe a little bit far off, because we have to decide, like, we're not even sure like what the buffer zone should be, and like and how I think there's a bunch of steps to discuss before you even vote yes and get to a rulemaking level.
Yeah, I was going to say we don't have a tremendous backlog of new lists or D-lists. I think we've got 2 or maybe 3. I see you have got your hand up, Roz, so I don't know if you've got the scorecard there. But on the other hand, I do think that there's, this is kind of one where a lot of the issues that we kind of avoided when we put critical habitat forward on essentially already protected land, this brings up a lot of those questions. So I think in some ways it would be nice to kind of have a deeper conversation maybe about this and only this. But go ahead, Roz.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we should let the, as much as I appreciate the batching and we'd want to try to do that. And I'm sure I'd get pressure to do that. We don't want to rush this in order to batch it because of what Alan just said. And yeah, we need to resurvey, find out, more about the threats and the impacts and have some sort of, management proposal included with this proposal so that we know. But I do wonder about whether anything can be done in the meantime, because we all know that takes time to develop all that, and it is an endangered species. So I haven't really put any thought into it or discussed it, but I just wonder if there's anything that can be worked out as a stopgap in case, if we do think these are significant threats.
100% with you, Roz. I think there's probably stuff we could do right now that have nothing to do with critical habitat that we've identified. So I don't know, maybe the SAG and we could talk about that or something, some things we could do that would be immediate.
There's
Just
one
as an
person on
endangered
staff
species.
who's pretty excited to do a survey.
I bet. She's
Do we need
It's
to
not
show,
Alyssa.
I mean, how important
okay.
how important is it that we show with new data that this thing is still extant at this site?
Yeah, that was something Matt brought up at the last meeting as well. I mean, I think not just that, but also, the negative data is also a bit of a question as well. I'm gonna call it and say leave it there. And thanks everyone. Awesome meeting, and I'll be back in touch. And I don't know. I think this would be a good conversation to have maybe outside of the April meeting if we can figure out another time to get together and talk about it.
Great.
If anybody has any side questions and it's allowed, feel free to email me. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have. And I'm happy to update the report too. So.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You got it.
Yep.